So hey guys, how's it going on? Welcome back to a brand new episode, and today in this video we are going to cover Node.js and ExpressJS. So yeah, this video is the most important one because today we are going to learn how to create backend APIs, how to make fetching requests to our database, and how to get the data in the front end, and all that information is going I'm going to teach you in this particular episode. So I'm hoping that you have covered all the previous lectures and previous topics and you are here to do the final stuff, to learn the final thing, and then become a Mern stack developer, a full stack developer who can build websites on his own. So, are you get ready? So, let's get started without any further ado. So, first of all, as I said, we are going to cover Node.js and ExpressJS in today's video. So, first of all, let's come to something. What is Node.js specifically? So previously what used to happen is that we were only able to run JavaScript over the web. We can't use it like a normal programming language to run in the terminals, etc., like CPP, Python, etc. We can only run it in web-based browsers, right? But with the coming of Node.js, what actually happened is that Node.js provides a runtime environment to JavaScript. Using Node.js, we can run JavaScript anywhere. Because of this runtime environment thing only, we can create servers now using JavaScript because we can run this JavaScript files over our servers and our computers. So with that, we can create a server as well. So that is how JavaScript become this much powerful that we can now even create backends using it. And all thanks goes to Node.js, right? And now this is the basic intro about Node.js. So you can see this is kind of code which Node.js provides us. Now this is basically JavaScript itself. This is not any other language. Node.js is just a runtime environment over JavaScript. Now, as you can see here, it is free, it is open source, and yeah, it is cross-platform as well. You don't need a Windows or a Mac specifically, you can run it anywhere. And yeah, it lets developers create servers, web applications, command line tools, and scripts, and a lot more. So to proceed, as I said, as in the React session, you need to download Node.js. So yeah, you can just download it right away. And similar to this thing, we also have ExpressJS. Now, what is ExpressJS? Now, ExpressJS is a framework for Node.js. Remember in the React session, I told you the difference between a library and a framework. So yeah, frameworks is a layer over the something. Let's say for here, ExpressJS is a framework over Node.js. So we don't need to get things from outside. Express provides all the tools which Node.js covers in a briefer and simpler way. Now let us see, this is a way of creating a server. All right, this is a way of creating server and all the stuff. But when I show you later on in this video how to do it with ExpressJS, then you will be like, yeah, this is quite better than this. All right, so yeah, that is the main point of Express. Now, what are we going to do in this video? So, in this episode or in this video, we are going to build a basic API of user authentication, of login and register things about a user. And in the next video, we are going to build a badass project using React, MongoDB, Node.js, ExpressJS, entire Mern framework. All right, so yeah, let's tighten your seat up and start coding along with me. So, let's get into VS Code and do our stuff. So right now I'm on my VS Code, and yeah, as usual, I have created a new folder. I want to create a new folder. So let's just create it in here. So in the full stack course directory, which I had from the first session of this playlist, let's create a new one. Let's say Mern. So if I do this, inside this folder, I want to create a new folder called as server. Now this will consist of all our server code. So now what I will do is open the terminal. Now note, before doing all this, I want you to install Node.js in your machine. So yeah, the link will be in the description. So if you haven't downloaded before, just do it right now. All right. So first of all, let's go into this folder, the CD folder. So I'll do CD Mern, and I'll go into the Mern, and then I will do CD server, so that I'll go into the server directory. Now what we are going to do is we need to initialize some basic details about our server, right? So there is a command we can type in like npm init and -y. Now it will still work if I don't type -y, but for now let's hit enter and you will see what will happen. So yeah, now we have a package.json which initialized our folder directory with some basic data. So if I remove this terminal, you can see we got the name, the directory name, the server is the name of our server, and then we got a main file index.js which is not created. We have to create it. and then we have some basic scripts, and these are some basic data. Now, when you press dash y, the name will be taken from the directory name itself. But when you just do npm init and then enter, and then you have to give data manually. So I prefer this is the better thing. And if I need something to change, I can change it here right away. All right. So that is why I use dash y there. All right. Now this part is done. Now this is okay. I have something now. So now what is the next thing we are supposed to do? Within this server, we are going to create a file called index.js. Now this will be our main file. Whenever we run our server, this is the file which will start running. All right. So first of all, let's do something. So first of all, let's create an Express app. Now, as I said, we won't be using Node.js code directly most of the places, or you can assume everywhere we never use Node.js code. We use ExpressJS because it turns things like if there is a code base of like 100 lines of code using Node.js, we can write that in presumably like in 20 lines using ExpressJS. That's why we just use ExpressJS everywhere because it makes our job very easy. And that is the main point about technology and all. We want to make our things simpler and easy, right? So let us say const express, and I want to have express, right? I want to import express. So I will say require, and then express is the name of the module. Now currently my folder doesn't contain anything called express. So how do I get Express there? So what I do is I'll open up the terminal, and here I'll do npm install, and then I'll type Express. Now this will install the Express package into my server. Now if I hit enter, you will see it will be installed within few seconds. And then you see now it's completely installed, and I am seeing another folder here called node modules. Now this contain all the basic things, all the packages, everything which we install. And this is the package.log.json. It contains some basic data about everything about our server, like all the modules, all the data will be in package.log.json, and in package.json we just keep the main data. And whenever you install some package, or you can call them dependencies as well, they will be added here. Now express and its version has been added here. That is how it works. All right. So now I can use Express in my server. All right. So now what I do is now we create an Express app. Like we want to start an thing called like server for our application. So what I'm going to say is I will say const app is equals to Express. Now, what is this thing doing? So I am taking a variable which is calling this express function. Now, this express functions creates an app for us, a server application for us, and I'm just storing that thing in an app variable. All right. Now, as you also know that for every server, there is generally a port, right? Let's say port 8080, port number 5010. There are multiple ports. Like whenever you run your application using React or something, you get some port number. This is the port number here. Similarly, for our backend also, we need to have some port. Whenever you host a website, they give you a certain port, right? Similarly, so for this application, let's create a port. So I'll say port. For now, let us just make it 3001. So this is my port number. All right, I got my port number. What is the next thing we need to do? The next thing will be like, let us say app.listen. Now what we want to do is we want to listen to a certain port. And then this port will have an arrow function. Whenever we are listening to this port, we need to do some certain thing. So I will just log something. Let's say server is up and running on the port number. This is the port number. All right. Now I will hit save. And now if I run this file, I should see this thing because now the server is running. Now this is the basic part. Now we have created a server successfully. Now if I open my command line, and let me just clear this, and if I type in node and then the name of the file, now remember that you have to be in this directory, then only you have to type this node, and then I type index.js, and if I hit enter, you will see server is up and running. Now there are no errors. Like The code has nothing yet, but we have successfully created our first ever server, which is running on this port right now. So if I come here and show you this, go to localhost 3001 and hit enter. We don't have any get request right now, but yeah, this server is like if I change it to something else, you will see we get a different error. Let's make it 302. So you will see we can't see anything like this site can't be reached. Whereas this 3001 exists because we just created it and it is currently running, right? So yeah, it is running. We can get to know that much. Now I created a basic thing, but how do I actually create a database and how do I do API stuff and all that? Tell us that. That is more important. So let's get to it. So in the previous video, we learned MongoDB, right? We created a MongoDB instance in offline, like in our machine, in our desktop. Right now, let's create on the cloud, which we can like it, which is directly hosted. We can just directly use it. All right. Let's do that right now. So for that, I'm just closing this right now, and let's just close these as well. So what are we doing is we are going to type in MongoDB Atlas. So once we are here, open it. Let's sign in with your account. Just create any Google account you need. So I'm just signing in with my Google account. So once you log in, you will see some interface like this. So now what you have to do is click on this button, this arrow, and then scroll down and click on new project. Now, these are all my basic projects which I used to like learn this full stack development. But yeah, those are the databases of my old project. So first of all, let's give a name to our project. Let's create a to-do list. So yeah, I am just revealing the surprise. We are going to build a to-do list in the next session, which is going to be like more functionality than the one which we previously built. It will be hosted on cloud. You will have multiple accounts. So yeah, there is more to it. I'll explain you all the details in the next session. So just keep patience and wait for it. So for now, let's just say to-do app. I'll just say to-do app. Now there's already a project in this organization with that name. So let's just say to do app version 2. I'm just naming it like that. You can name it anything you want. And then I want to click next. All right. Now I am the owner of this thing. So yeah, I don't want to change anything. I will be clicking on create project. Now once I click on it, you will see a project will be created. And now you can see a project has been created. Now I want to create a cluster which can provide me some database and stuff like that. So this is a cloud concept. A cluster, you can see it can provide you, it is a cloud provider. It will provide you with regions, specs, and once we instantiate this cluster, then only we can use a database as well. So yeah, I'm going to click on create, and then now you can see here we have some different versions. So this one is M01, which provides us with 10 GB of storage, 2 GB of RAM, and we got the CPU versions. Okay, this is two version CPUs. So this is like paid one. We have to pay $0.08 per hour, and this is going to be serverless. But for this video, because we are just testing and building some development stuff, so we are going to select this one, which is free. It provides us 512 MB, which is okay for development projects, which are not like in production and something like that. So, and it is some shared RAM storage, and yeah, this is our cluster name, and we want to select AWS. Rest of the things, let it be same. Just make sure you select this as free, and then just click on create deployment, and it will create your cluster. Now, once your cluster is created, you have to actually get your username and password. Now, right now I have hidden this username and password. What I want you to do is copy them and store them separately because you will need them in a few seconds. So yeah, we should store them separately. Once you have stored them, click on choose a connection method. All right, before click on choose a connection method, press on create database user. Now once you do that, then click on choose a connection method. Now once you do that, click on drivers. Now we have Node.js and all, right? Now currently the cluster is still creating, so I will meet you in like, so I'll stop the recording for now, and once the cluster provisioning is done, then I will just start the recording again. Once your cluster provisioning is completed, you can just confirm that your cluster is created and you will see an interface similar to this. And now in the overview, scroll down and then click on get connection string. And now what you have to do is copy this thing. So I'm just going to copy it and paste it in my notepad. So I'll just save it by opening a notepad. So I'll just save it here. All right. Let me just remove this. All right. I saved it here. Now what we have to do is click on done. Now let's go to our VS Code again. And now first of all, let's close this. Let's stop our server. So I'm just going to press Control C and it is closed right now. So now within the server, let's create a new file called .env. Now why is this .env used? Now if you have ever seen a GitHub repository, which is an open source project, let's say, the project is actually deployed, but when you fork that repository or run the code, it won't run because you there are some environment variables like authentication details, all the details about the actual production server, which everyone which should not be shared. So details like the database URI and all those stuffs you don't share with anyone. You keep them with yourself. So that's why this is the file which you don't share with anyone. And whenever we need this URI in our, let's say this file, so we just simply import it. How to import that, I'm going to teach you within a few seconds. So just wait. So what you do is store this as a variable, let's say db URI. So now make sure that this variable name is capital, like it's totally in caps lock, and yeah, then paste it here. Cool. Now what we have to do is the password which we copied previously should be replaced in this place. So yeah. Instead of DB password, replace that password with that. So I'm just going to save it and close this and add my password there. All right. Now, once you do that, what is the next thing you need to do is go to network access. And what you need to do is now this is the IP address. If it's your current IP address, it's currently active through which you created the database. It works, but I don't know why, but for my Wi-Fi network, it doesn't actually work fine. So what I do is in development process, click on add IP address. You can add your current IP address here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on allow access from anywhere. With this, uh, your database can be accessed via your account from anywhere in the world. All right. So I'm clicking on confirm. Now this will take a few minutes to make it active. So yeah. So as you can see, it's now created. So now we are done with the database stuff. Now we don't need to use Compass. We can directly use Atlas for everything. But if you want to view database in a much faster way, you can get this database, this connection URI into your Compass GUI, which we previously downloaded in the previous lecture. You can just paste it there and you can get all the data about the database, right? So yeah, now let's initialize this database in our server. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a folder. Now guys, in this lecture I'm also teaching you how to create folders in your server, so make sure you keep an eye of for the naming conventions. And also in the server, first let's create a folder. Let's call it db, and within this db all the database stuff will be in this db folder. So yeah, we'll be creating a file called connection.js, and yeah, this is it. Now in this file, what we are going to do is we want to connect our MongoDB file in our server. Now there is a particular package which is used for this, which is known as Mongoose. Now Mongoose is used to call MongoDB functionalities from our ExpressJS, or you can say the Node.js server. So first of all, let's just install it. So I'm going to say npm I mongoose. Now this will install Mongoose into our node modules again for the server. So yeah, this is done. So once it will be installing, so what I'm going to do it, I'm going to get that. So I'm going to say const mongoose is equals to require mongoose. Now, once we get this thing, now what we need to do is we need to get our DB URI, which we stored in the .env. So what we are going to say is, we'll say const, I'm going to say DB URI, DB underscore URI, let's just name it DB. All right. I'm going to say process dot env dot caps lock DB underscore URI. This is the name we gave it. Now, if I hit save, now the DB URI which we saved in .env file should come here. But before that, there is one more thing which we need to do, which I'll tell you in a few minutes. To actually use this process.env, there is another package which we have to install. Just wait a bit. Where that change you have to do in index.js. I'll just tell you once we complete the connection of the mongoose. So now what we need to do is we'll say mongoose dot connect, and in this connect, first of all, we pass in the DB URI. So we stored it as a variable DB. Now, once this is connected, what we will do is we have to pass in some basic parameters. These are the general parameters which we use. So like set use new URL parser to true, use unified topology. That's generally the things which we always use. So you just need not understand these in depth right now. Just let them be as they are. Now, once this connection is done, I'm going to use something like dot then. All right. Now, what this dot then does is whenever this thing is completed successfully, I can show myself some logs. Like right here, I'm going to say log and I will say connection successful. All right. Let's say DB connection successful. This states that the database has been successfully connected. If not, what I'm going to say is dot catch. Now this catch will get an error, right? If there are any errors, it will tell us. So yeah, we got the error. So I'm going to say console dot error. And as you can see, let's say this database connection error. And here I will just type in error dot message, and this is fine. Now if I hit save, you will see a basic database connection is ready. So now what we do is back in the index.js, first, as I said, we need to do some setup for using the environment variables in our folders, right? So for that, there is a package called .env. So let's first install it. So I'm going to say npm i .env. Now it will be installed. So as it is installed, let's just import it. So I'm going to say const .env is equals to require.env. Now this will import it. All right. So now what is the next thing we do is we need to actually require the database. Now we need to actually make the connection in the index.js file. But to keep our structure systematic, we created it in a folder called DB. Within that DB folder, we had something called as connection.js. Now I want to do this process inside of index.js. Now, if I keep all this code here, it will still work, but it will make it clumsy, like everything in a single place. So what we do to keep our code clean and structured, we import this file here. So we directly do require dot slash db and slash connection. Dot slash db will go into db folder, and then slash connection will go into the connection.js file. Now if we hit save, now this connection file, all the code which is currently running in here will run here as well. So now if I show you, now before doing that, I want to tell you a short trick for faster development. So let's install something called as NodeMon. Now, previously I ran this index.js file using node index.js command. But if I now do something like NodeMon index.js, it still does the same thing. But right now, whenever I make any new changes, I need not like close the terminal, close the server, and again restart it using node index.js. As soon as I make the changes and save my files, this thing will be like refreshed automatically. I don't need to run the command again and again. As you can see, there is some error in the DB setup. DB connection error, which is this one you see, DB connection error, and then we see the error message. So let me see what it is. So it's saying the URI parameter to open URI must be a string got undefined. Show the first parameter to mongoose.connect. So there is some error. Let me just have a look at it. So guys, the error is simply because I have just required the .env file. I haven't actually configured it for our like server application. So we need to say .env.config. Now this will create the configuration and return some actual DB URI which we stored in the .env file here. But if we don't do this thing, it will not. It will simply return undefined. So that is why there was an error. So now if I open up the terminal, you will see. All right, we just remove these two things because they are not supported. All right, in the new thing, we don't use them. So let's just remove them and hit save. And now you can see DB connection bad or authentication failed. So it states that there is something wrong with my password or let's say ID, which I saved in my DB URI. So let me check them. So once I changed my DB URI, there was some mistake in my password. So yeah, if I just run it again, you will see here DB connection successful, which comes whenever we have successfully connected. So yeah, now our database is successfully connected to our server. So the basic stuff, the database connection, the starting up of our server is done. So now let's actually get going. So as you previously know, we created an Express app. What are we going to do now? Let's create something called as this is a basic stuff which we generally do in all our applications because we are going to create APIs based on JSON. So we are using something called as express.json. Now, what does this line of code do? It provides API calls like to the front end in JSON format and from the front end to the back end in JSON format. So it automatically converts all the interchange of data into JSON format. That is the use of it. All right. What do we do next? Now let's create a router and some functions, user functions. All right. So right now, this is it. We don't have any errors. GB connection is successful and this is all cool. So now we need some user functions, some user routers to create our very first API. So let me do something. Let me clear this directory structure for you. So now I have just open the server folder directly in the VS Code. So now what are we going to do is, as I said, we are going to take care of authentication part of our to-do list application in this episode. So what I'm going to do is create a new folder called routers, which will uh, keep all the routers for our application. Now, what are routers? So if I explain it to you, let's use Excalibur real quick. So yeah, let's just come in. So whenever you are into a website, right, there are some specific things you need to be redirected about. Like suppose I have user functions. Now the user can either register, he can either register or he can either login, right? The user can either register or he can log in. So these are two different routes. Now registering is one route and login is another route. Now both doesn't have a similar functionality. In register, we need to provide user details along with email ID password. But whereas in login, we only need to provide something like handle or password or email ID and password, something like that, right? So these are two different routes. So similarly for user, we will have a router for like to-do lists to add new tasks and all. We can have another router. Think of it in that particular way. All right. So what are we going to do is within this routers, let's create a file for the user functions, which are like register and login and authentication. All right. So let's create a file named user router.js. If I hit enter, now this is cool. Now what we are going to do is we need to use something called as a router from which Express provides us again. As I told you, it's a framework. It provides us everything on its own. So we are going to say const. And now this router, we don't directly want Express itself. We want something called as a router, which is within Express. Like you can call it like a module, which you can use. All right. So yeah, we imported router. Now, once we have router, what we need is we need some functions like register and login, which we need to use within the router, right? So I will explain those a little later. So what we are going to do is, let's say const router is equals to this router which we imported, and then call this function. Now this will initialize a router for this user router which we just created. And now we need multiple functions. One, the user can register. The second thing, the user can log in. And the third thing, we need to provide some authentication to check if a user is currently logged in or not. So what we are going to do is, let's first of all, let's only create router dot post. Now there are multiple requests. Now let me explain you about multiple requests, what they are. So we have a get request, we have a post request, we have a put request, we have a patch request, and we also have something known as a delete request. Now in APIs, we have five kinds of different requests. Now in get request, what actually happens is, get request is used whenever you need to only read data. Get request can only read data, it cannot do anything. Whereas in post request, whenever you are making the request, you also send in some data. Like whenever you are registering a new user, you send his data to the network or the server, and the server stores that data and returns you with some other data, like your login data, something like that. All right. The put data is used to update the data. Like I send in the data about which data I need to update, and the server receives it and checks, okay, this is the thing this guy wants to update, and it will update it. Okay. Input data we need to, now patch is also similar thing. It is also used to update the data. The major difference between put and patch is that put is used, like whenever you use put, you need to pass in the entire data which needs to be changed. Whereas in patch, you just provide in the data through which one can identify the data, and then only the data which needs to be updated. Like for example, input request, if I want to update a task in a to do, I need to send in the entire new to do which needs to be updated, like it will be totally replaced. Whereas in patch, I can only just share the time which needs to be changed, or let's say the text of the task which needs to be shared. I can only share that, and it will be updated. In more simpler way, I can simply say put is used to replace, whereas patch is used to like update. This is the major difference between both these. And coming to delete, it's just simply delete the task. All right, delete the data, something like that. So I hope these are clear, but if these are not, we are going to code these things up, so you will eventually get them. All right. So we are in VS Code again. So as I said, first we want to create one for register. So what I'm going to say is, let's say register. So whenever I make a call to, let's say, my backend domain name slash user slash register, I want to make the user register. So I will be calling the register function here. Now, where is this register function? We don't have any register function, right? I am going to create it. So before we proceed with user router.js, let's create another folder and another file wherein we can define these functions for register, login, and etc. All right. So within the server, let's create a new folder, cannot within router, within the server called as controllers. Now, why can't we directly write the register function here? We can absolutely, but that will make the code a little clumsier. So what we do is we write all our functions or logic in these controllers as different functions, and we can directly import those functions here and call them here. That is a better way to do things. All right. So yeah, this is it. Now within the controllers, let's create something called as a user controller, which will keep in functions which are user based, like register, login, authentication, and stuff. For to dos, we can create another controller. All right. So let's just say user controller.js. Now this is it. Now, did you notice something? If you think carefully, I will say register, I will pass in the user data, but in the database, all the data needs to be in a particular format. But right now my database is empty. I don't have any collections I don't have anything. How will my data actually get stored? So this is the time when you actually think about something as models. I need to create a structure, a database model, a collection model for my database. In that structure only my data will go and store, right? So for that, what we do is we create something called as models. So let's come here. Let's create a new folder. Let us say models. Now in this models, we have we will create something called as a user. So we need a user model and to do model. So we'll be implementing to do later on, as I said. So right now we only need a user model to store user data. So yeah, this much part is okay and fine. So now to create a model, we need some parameters like in routers, we need something like as router. So to create models, we need something called as a schema and something called as a model. All right, from Mongoose itself, yeah. And this is fine. Now we will be using the .env like the variables here as well. So what we are going to say is let's just require the .env and then just make it config also here as well. You can do it this way. So yeah, we also have configured the .env here. So now what we are going to say is we are going to define something called as a user schema. So we'll say const and then we'll get the user schema. Now we want to create a schema, or you can say a structure in which we want the data to be stored in the database. So what we say, we create a new schema. This is the structure or the syntax how we create it. Now within this, first of all, each user will have a name. So the name will have a type of string. Name will be of type string, and it is a required thing. Now each user must have a name. That is what I'm saying. Now that is all the details about the name. Each user must also have an email. So what I'm going to say, the type of the email is also a string, and required it is also required. It is like must. Every user must have an email. So yeah, this is required. And then I'll say password, and password is type string and required true again. Now each user will have multiple to-dos where we will store each of the to-dos. So yeah, I'm just going to create something called as to-dos, and this is going to be an array in where we will have each to-do. So I'm going to say something like, I'll explain this in the next episode. So yeah, for now I'm just typing it in so that you know that something like this is going to come. So I will have its object ID, and I'm referring to a to-do here. So yeah, this is how it works. So yeah, just ignore this part for now. All right. So this is the user schema. This is the data each user needs to have. All right. Now if we save it, now again go back to user controller. Now if we go back to user controller, what do we need to do here? We just need to import this, you can say the schema first. So to import this schema, what you have to do is, like first we need to export it. So we'll say module.exports. Let's export this user schema. You can just do that like this. Now we are exporting it as user, and what are we exporting? We are exporting user schema, which is a module. That is what we are doing. All right. You can say we want to export it as user. So yeah, this is good. Now what this will do is whenever I need to use this model, I can just get this user from this file and I can just use it. All right. Now if I go to user controller in here, let's just import that user. So I'll say user require it from dot slash models, and from the dot slash models we need it from the user file. Now we got the user. Now what we need to do is we'll say module dot exports dot register. Now this is a register function which we are going to use. Now this is going to be an asynchronous function. Now what does an async means? Now let me explain you. There are two types of functions in JavaScript. One is synchronous and the other one is asynchronous. All right, let me make them bigger. So yeah, what are these two types of functions actually? Now in synchronous processes, one process, let us say we have multiple processes. Let us say we have three different processes which are supposed to run. So in synchronous process, once this is completed, then only we will move on to the next one. And once this is completed, then we will move on to the next one. Until and unless one is completed, we cannot move to the next one. So we run processes one after the other. Whereas in asynchronous, what actually happens is if we have three processes here, if this is currently running and I want to run this, it's okay. I can still run this. I don't need to make sure that it is completed or not. I can still run both at the same time. If that's my requirement, I can do that. So that is what is the major difference between synchronous and asynchronous. All right. So we are creating an asynchronous function. So in you can say in a router function, we take two things. One is the request and one is the response. Now, request is the data which we get, and response is the data which we send. All right. So, if I say this, we are defining an arrow function here. So, yeah, that is it. Now, we'll implement something called as a try catch block to actually create a basic try. Now, in the JavaScript session, I taught you about try catch. It's the same thing. So, now what we are going to say is now because I'm registering, there is some data which I will take. The name, the email, the password, right? So what I'm going to say is const, I'll take the name, I'll take the email of the user, and I'll take the password of the user. These are the three details which I will take. Now these three details will be taken like from the body. Whenever we are now I about this body, you will eventually learn in a few minutes in this video itself. So just have a little patience. So I'm just going to proceed with the rest of the stuff for now. So first, whenever a new user is registering, I want to make sure that this user doesn't already have an account. So what I'm going to say const, and I'm just going to name it existing user is equals to await user. Now, this was the model which we previously created, right? We imported it. So we're going to say user, then find one. Now, this is the function which we used in the MongoDB session. Now, in Mongoose, we use it like this: the model dot the function, and this within this, we just need to find it via the email, right? So the body contains the email. So we're going to say request.body dot email. Now that is cool. Now this way we can find in our existing user. If there is any user with the same email, what I want to say is throw in some error. So this is our user. So we say if the existing user exists, in that case, return me, we'll say response.status. Now there are something about like status codes, which I will tell you later on. But for now, let's just simply complete this. Right? We are going to send in something like the success. We are going to send in some basic data. We are not going to use any status code right now. We're going to say success is false, like there is no success, your thing hasn't been completed, there is something wrong. And I'm going to give the message like what is wrong. I'll say user already exists. It's as simple as that. And if I save it, this much part is done. Now, if the user doesn't exist, what we need to do? Now, we can't directly save passwords like this. So that if you save passwords like this, your passwords will not be encrypted. And if by any chance, if someone else sees a user data, he can easily log in his account. Like even if this is your application, it is not right to see anyone else's passwords. All right. So that's why the password should be encrypted in every project, in every application, like simply everywhere. So we need to create a functionality which can encrypt our passwords. So for now, let's just say hashed password, and we are going to create a password, create a function to encrypt this thing. All right. So what are we going to do now? Now, before we proceed with this, I want to tell you about this await keyword. Now, as I said, we have asynchronous functions. Now, whenever we have an asynchronous functions, the async keyword comes along with the await keyword. Now, this is an asynchronous function which is running. So I will have to wait for this thing to complete so that I can provide it with the next things, right? If I have this, then and only then I can proceed to this thing. So I am saying that stay on this line until this process is complete. So wait till that. That is why we use the await keyword. So this much part is done. Now let's work on this password thing, the hash password, how to encrypt this thing. So for this, let's create something like a password hasher, a password encryptor. So this is a separate function. So let's call them like helper functions and let's create a helpers folder. So I'm going to say helpers, and within this helpers, let's create something like auth helper. So we want to create it something like an authentication helper. So I'm going to say .ps. Now here we are going to use something called as bcrypt. Now this bcrypt module is used to for encryption. So let's just quickly install it. So I'm going to say npm I bcrypt, and if I hit enter, it will install in the background. And now what we are going to do is we are supposed to create a function. So I will say const hash password, not hash password. I want to make it hash password. So yeah, hash password. This is also an asynchronous function. So yeah, it takes in some password as the parameter and performs operations over it. So what we are going to do is we are going to use a try catch block again. In the catch, let's just simply log the error and do nothing else. This is good enough. So yeah, what we do is we create some parameters. All right. So let's say const salt rounds. Just give me a second. Yeah, salt rounds. Now, what are salt rounds? These are like some encryption parameters, like at what level you need the parameter, you need the encryption to be. Like more the number of salt rounds, better the security, right? So I'm going to say now const this hashed password. Let's make it hashed password. Now this hashed password is going to be, we'll again do await bcrypt dot hash. Now within this hash, we pass in our password and this number of salt rounds. Now this is 10. All right. So yeah, this much part is done. And once this process is done, we just simply return this hashed password. And in here in the user controller, we will it will be stored in this variable, right? So yeah, this much part is done. So cool enough. I'll hit save, and now because I am using it, let's export it. So I'm going to say module dot exports dot hash password. Cool. Now I'll save it back to user controller. So yeah, const hash password, and now in here, we'll just do await, and then we'll say hash password and pass in this password here. Now you see we also have to import the hash password as we did in here. So yeah, VS Code automatically imported it for me, so that is a good thing about it. So yeah, that is it. Now we got the hash password. Now the next process is to create the new user and then store it into the database. So what we are going to say, const user is equals to, now this is going to be await as well. So await new user. Now this is the model. Now within this new user, we gave him a name, and then we have an email, and then we have his password which is equivalent to hashed password. That is it. Now this is it. Now once we created it, we call the save function. All right. We call the user.save function. Now what is happening here? Now here instead of this, you can also say name.name, but because both the variable names in the model as well as here are same, so I can just say name. Whereas in place of password, I'm creating a new variable called hash password. So I will be storing it with that. So once you are done with this, I can send in this registered data back to the front end. How do I do that? I'll again say response dot status. Now here comes the main thing. What are these status codes? So let me show you. GPT status codes. So there are multiple types of status codes which we generally have. Now 200s are like okay, successful request. 400s are like bad request, and 401 is like unauthorized. Like every status code, whenever you use websites, you might see error 401, which is quite famous, right? So similar to that, we can have multiple types of requests. Now each code like 201 has like successful, and yeah, each number has a specific status representation. Like this is the particular error. This code is here because of this error. A specific error is associated with each status code. So you should know them. I will attach a list of these status codes in the description. You can check it out. Just give a brief read to it and it will be all good. All right. Coming to the next part. So here we are using status code 201 because the response is a success. So I'm going to say send. So within the send, what we are going to send, we will say that this is a success. So I'll set success to true. I will set success to, let's say, true. And once we have done this, what I'm going to say, I'm going to give a message saying user created successfully, and then I will pass in the user details as well, saying that this is the error, this is the user which was just created. Now this is the user which we created, right? So yeah, the same thing. So here we'll do console log dot error, response state is 500, and the success is false because we met with an error and some server error occurred. So yeah, the registered function is now complete, guys. Trust me, it's now complete. Now I will show you the implementation of this register function, and this is, I think hopefully it works. But before we do that, there is something else in the user router. We need to import this register function. So I registered it. Now you can see it's auto imported from controllers slash user control. Now if I hit save, and now if we just export this router. Now coming to export, we can just simply do module.exports router. And once we do that, once we export the router, we save it, and then we go back again to our index.js to actually use this router. And how do we do that? If we go to the index.js here, similar to this app.use, what we need to do is we need to say something like app.use. Now here, as we are creating an APIs, and as we are creating, currently we are creating user functions, let us say slash user. All right. And slash user, I'll simply say, I want to get the user router here. So I can do this. I can require directly dot slash routers slash user router. So that all this implementation comes in here. But it would be better if I store it as a different variable. So what we are going to do is, let's say const user router equals to this thing, and I can simply use my user router here. Now this much part is done. I think we have completed entire functionality for this register functionality. Let me just run it and see if there are no errors. So I'm going to say nodemon index.js, and you see DB connection successful. I don't see any errors. That is a good thing. Now guys, I am going to tell you how do you actually test your APIs, right? For that, there is an application, or you can say a software called as Postman. So if you search for Postman download, you can go to this website, download it. It is something through which you can test your backend applications or backend APIs. So yeah, to make queries, to make something like that. So you can just download it. I've already downloaded, so I'm going to open it real quick. I'll give the link in the description. You can just check it out right there. Okay. So once you download Postman and open it, log in with any of your accounts. What I'm going to do is, now these are my previous testing, like previous applications when I was developing them. So what I want to do is I want to test a new project. So I will say create a blank collection. So here I will rename this collection to be, let's say, to do app. Once I do this, I want to create a new request. I'll click on these things and click on add request because I want to create a request for registering. So I will say register. I'll say register and hit enter. So this is it. Now this is a post request. So I'll say post. Now, as we know, our if we go to index.js, our port number is 3001. And here we can go to the link localhost 3001. If I hit enter, this is the URL. So I'll just copy it and paste it in my here 3001. And if you remember, we use slash user, so slash user, and then slash, if we go to the user router, slash register, right? So user slash register. Now these are the parameters. If we go to headers, so here we say content type, and in the value we'll say application slash JSON, because we want our data to be in the JSON format. So this is something which we generally do for all our requests. So yeah, we click on body and I want to pass in the data. So what are the data which we need to pass from the front end? Like if a user is registering, what is all the data we need to pass? As you can see, we need a name, we need an email, we need a password, right? So I will give it a name. Let's give it Naruto. And then I want to give something an email. Now here we are not doing any email verification for now. So I am just giving a random email. I'm just saying naruto@gmail.com. Now remembering this is JSON, so you need these as well in quotes. Cool. After this, we need a password. So let's create a password. So I'll give it a password. Let's say something like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. All right. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Cool. Now this much part is done. Now, currently you see there are no requests made. What I'm going to say is if I click on send, it should work fine. So now you can see it returns us the data. The success true, the message user created successfully, which you will see here. Let me show you. In user controller, user created successfully, and the user data. The user data is this name Naruto, email this, and this is the password, and the to-dos which are currently empty. We defined them in the model, you remember this thing, and the ID which I said that in the previous session that MongoDB generates for every document. And yeah, this is just random thing. This is with the new MongoDB update. It came something like dash dash v0. Now, the main part. If I go to my browser, go to my database, the data should be updated. So let me just go over my database. This is my cluster. And if I, within the clusters, if I go to browse collections, and then within the collections, if I go to, we created the users model, remember? So within this users model, we got Naruto, the Naruto at the Gmail, and the password is encrypted. Even I don't know what the password is. I can't guess with this what the password can be, right? No one can decrypt this password. Only our application can if we write another function to decrypt it. All right. So currently the to-dos array is empty, so you can see now the data is actually stored. Similar to this, we also need to make a login function and an auth helper and all that stuff. I know this video has become very long, so yeah, this is ExpressJS and Node.js, how you actually create your functions and your first APIs, how you make routers, how you make helper functions and use them by exporting from one file to another. This is how you create a model, and this is how you start your server and all. So I hope you didn't completely understand Node.js and ExpressJS with this one video, but you have a basic idea of how things work in here. So with the end of the next video, in which we will be building a complete to-do list application. So make sure you're prepared, because the next episode is also going to be a bit lengthier. I guess quite lengthier. So yeah, because actually we are going to build an entire application. So I hope you got something valuable from this sessions. Thank you so much for watching. I'll meet you again with another beautiful one in which we'll be creating a full stack project. I am just too excited to make it. So yeah, that's it for this video. We'll see you soon, and bye bye guys.